Hello and welcome to a Monster Mechanics mini episode where we're going to be talking about the Grabboids from Tremors. So the reason why this is a bonus episode is because it is a failed main episode. Zach and I and a bunch of our friends have a movie night, and sometimes I make that into homework for Monster Mechanics where I make us watch a monster movie. And I did that with Tremors recently, and we came out of it and we're talking about how we would improve the Grabboids. And at least from Tremors 1, I'm not sure that we really can. Well, it's not a good candidate for us. There's not enough meat on the bone, as we usually say.
Yeah, that is true. I know if we were to watch the entire anthology, I'm sure we would have some pointers.
We're going to limit this discussion about the Grabboids to just the information revealed in Tremors 1, because neither of us, I think both of us have watched Tremors 2, at least in chunks and bits on basic cable, but neither of us can remember anything about it.
Yeah.
Except Kevin Bacon's not in that one. I do remember that.
But bailed on the series after the first one.
Yeah.
There's one actor in there. He's in it for the long haul. Like, he staked his career on this.
Yeah, it's the guy who plays the gun nut.
Yeah, that's right.
That's immaterial to the conversation we're having today, because what we'd like to do is talk a little bit about why the Grabboids, specifically from Tremors 1, are a really good example of how to set up a movie monster. I think the big thing is that when they set up rules for themselves, those are always either paid off later or they're hard and fast rules for the monster. The monster doesn't just come up with new abilities out of nowhere. And so things like the fact that they are blind is a pretty hard and fast issue. They can sense vibrations, but basically create a scenario where the floor is lava, right? You can't walk on the floor, and that becomes a tool that is both restrictive for the main characters, but also can be used against the Grabboids pretty well the whole time. Like, they never really get themselves around that, and especially they don't get around it by making up some BS new ability.
Yeah, there's no like, oh, now they can see, and we didn't talk about this at all. So, Surprise.
They also, just on a practical sense, they get around a lot of having to pay for so much of the movie of the practical effects by just having them underground the whole time, which is really nice. But other than that, they're pretty much a biological creature, and they have their little grabby tentacle hands, and they will pull things down, and they're basically just voracious eaters. But they also, I love that they established very early on when they the very first Grabboid that's killed, it accidentally runs itself into a drainage ditch and blows itself out through a concrete wall, and that's how it dies. Establishing it very clear that they are actually quite bad at seeing ahead of themselves. Like, they cannot, like, they are expecting, like, it sounds like they can avoid rocks and stone, but they have a hard time seeing air, essentially, because it doesn't respond to whatever echolocation sonar sensing system that they have.
Okay.
And that gets paid off in the last scene. Spoiler alert for Tremors 1, by the way. That gets paid off in the last scene when they are forced away from an explosion, and the last one comes out of the side of a cliff, and probably one of my favorite sequences in that movie, where the Grabboid comes flying out and then splashes into a huge gunky mess at the bottom of a cliff.
Yeah, that actually makes sense. It actually bothered me a little bit that, like, this species that was supposed to have been around forever was suddenly just having trouble dealing with obstacles that would have been there its whole life, like cliffs and open air and like that. But
I think I like I said, but by setting that up with the first Grabboid to be killed, I think they established that this is a thing that they just are not good at. It's a weakness for them, is that they can't sense open air ahead of themselves in whatever. Like, they're expecting a surface above them, not one to be like a cliff like that. And that kind of makes sense, because if they're relying on something like echolocation, then that wouldn't necessarily reflect in the same way that like a solid surface would, because it's a transition point to air instead of transition point to a different kind of solid, the same way that something like stone might. And I think that's a smart way to go. I also like the fact that they, at least in this movie, they're like smart. Like, at least the one with, they identify one of them by having a stumpy tentacle, and the having tricks that only work once or twice on implies the creature is learning. And that's smart. That is a good way to make a creature terrifying, instead of just like having it come up with some BS reason why you can't do the same thing over and over again. Having them figure it out and work around the problem is really good. I would absolutely recommend in your own stories to think about that way, the same way. If you were the creature, what would you do to get around it? Because something that is intelligently stalking you, much, much scarier than something that is just operating on hunger and instinct alone.
I think one of the really cool things that they did with this show, or this movie, was the staggered introduction of the creature. Where the first time, like, you're learning about it, like, it seems like it's this kind of eel-like thing, or later on you realize, like, nope, that's just its manipulator/tongue.
Yep. And they obviously were taking a lesson from Jaws with that reveal. Not that particular reveal. That's a twist on the Jaws thing. But like, do not show these things very much at all. Like, you get to see a dead one early on, and then you get to see the little tentacly bits, and then you get to see some heads and stuff as time goes on. They reveal that stuff rather late, and that is smart. That's something that, if you don't know the story, by the way, about Jaws, the reason why the shark isn't in it is because the animatronic shark they were going to have in all of the scenes kept sinking and breaking down. The hydraulics wouldn't operate underwater very well, apparently. So as a practical answer to that, Steven Spielberg he just like cut the shark from all the scenes, and then he has all these shots where it's from the shark's point of view, because you don't need the animatronic shark for that. You can just kind of imply things, and it turned out to be a much better movie because they showed it less. It like builds the tension longer. So this is all modern horror films, all modern monster movies have learned from that lesson. So you can kind of see how they're interpreting that idea. But yeah, I was thinking on that smartness quality, I was thinking the same thing of one of my other favorite monsters, which is wrong in every way, are the velociraptors from Jurassic Park, who do the same sort of like, you can't really trick them more than once. They remember things and they will pick it up the next time, which I think is a fantastic quality to have in a monster. They're not, but I can go on my rant about how every other thing about the velociraptors in Jurassic Park 1 are absolutely wrong. I don't remember how old I was when that movie came out. I was maybe 10 or 12, something like that. And I was incensed. I loved that movie to death, but like, I was like, those are Deinonychuses. Those are Utahraptors. Those are definitely not velociraptors. Velociraptors are little. Anyway, that's a rant for another time.
Little chicken birds.
Absolutely. Let's see, what are the other qualities of a Grabboid? So there are some things we could poke holes into. I'm just not sure they're worth an entire episode.
Yeah.
Mainly my thought is metabolism. These things are voracious eaters. Like they eat, like I think there's 3 of them in the movie. It's been a little while since we watched it, so maybe 4 total. But they eat like 30 people and a bunch of sheep, like an entire and like some. I think they at one point they like chomp on a car and stuff. That is implying that they are taking in a lot of calories. That's a little bit weird, because how would they have been sustaining themselves up until that moment? Exactly. It would have had to have been, I guess, a hibernation type thing. But that wasn't directly addressed in the movie. And that is a kind of a question that was bothering me during. I'm like, well, what do these things do the other 99.9% of the time when they're not eating everything in sight?
Yeah. For me, it was like, how has no one noticed these before? Like, with the amount of calories they're intaking, like, they've got to be doing serious damage to the ecosystem. Like, so I think like the dormancy thing kind of makes sense.
And they'd have to be dormant for a long time, probably hundreds of years, for it to have escaped, the Western settlement. Maybe it would have been known by, the people, the indigenous people who lived in the area before.
Yeah, that would make sense. Naturally,
like white people don't listen to the indigenous people. They're like, nah, that's a legend. We don't care about that. So you could get away that way. You could even go really long. I read an article recently, or at least when I say I read the headline of an article recently, like anyone else on the internet, about some worms that were pulled out of the Russian permafrost, which are said to have probably been frozen a couple thousand years ago, if not tens of thousands of years ago. And they thawed them out and actually got response from them. Like they started to move, and like they were alive still. They had just been frozen because
that's crazy.
Yeah, their bodies were such that they could survive being frozen, and once they were frozen, no further degradation. In this case, with it set in, I think it was Nevada or Arizona. So with it set in Arizona, obviously you can't use permafrost.
Yeah.
But you could
dehydrate them.
You could dehydrate them, or
just have a Grabboid jerky.
Or say something along the lines of they had been they like settled into like a incredibly slow, like cicada-like sleep where they were down for, tens of thousands of years. And that's something the humans then to disrupt them. That would make sense too. Like maybe the blasting from the mines or something. That'd be cool.
Fracking. There you go.
Oh man, that's a horror movie I'd make, where it's like the fracking unleashes something that's down in the permeable limestone that they're breaking open.
Dug too greedily and too deep.
Well, I think that's a decent enough little explanation of why we are not doing the Tremors 1 movie, and so that I can just eke a little bit of content out of us having to watch that movie. I mean, it was a good movie. I enjoyed it, but like I was expecting to get some content, so God damn it, I'm going to get some content out of it.
Yeah, I guess if we really want to mine that for content, we can go watch the other 9 movies or however many they are.
Yeah, and see, they may be too off the wall. Like they may have burned they may have gone scorched earth on any of the good stuff at that point. We'll have to find out sometime. All right.
Alrighty.
Well, if you would like to join us next week, our topic will be leprechauns. And in the meantime, find us on Twitter. We are at MonsterPod. I myself am at Scott Paladin, and Zach.
I'm at Pictoglyphic.
All right. Later.
Till next time.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Monster Mechanics. Say, you want to hear classical literature read out in this accent? Grab your podcatcher and plug in Cowboy Classics with Scott Paladin. Our most recent episode was a love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot. And tomorrow comes out The Soldier in Death, a classic Russian fairy tale. Anyway, on to the credits. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by me, Scott Paladin, and hosted by myself and my best friend, Zach Jaquays. There is currently a foster dog licking my pants for some reason. I think he probably wants to go out. Anyway, all of the ideas generated during this podcast are released under a Do What the F You Want public license.